What's going on, guys? Royce here from Royce Plays. So today we're going to be going over the Call of Duty Black Ops timeline. We're going to go through World War One, from World at War all the way to 3. This will also include Cold War. So let's get to the summary of the campaign. So essentially there's one whole campaign broken down into 2 groups, the Soviet group and I guess the American group. So it features a solo and co-op campaign, so if you want you can play 2-player campaign. But certain missions are unplayable, like on the final mission, or the first mission you can't play because, well, it's 1 player. Like, when you're playing, and we'll get to the missions after. So, the American campaign is set in the Pacific Theater on the islands of Makin, Palau, and Okinawa. The Soviet campaign is in the Eastern Front, mainly in Nazi Germany. In the American campaign, players take role as Private C. Miller as he fights along Sergeant Tom Sullivan and Corporal Roebuck, later Sergeant, or Corporal Roebuck, later Sergeant, and Private Polanski in the Soviet campaign takes the role of Private Dmitry Petrenko as he fights along the merciless Sergeant Viktor Reznov and the merciless Private Chernov. In the American campaign, players for the first time in Call of Duty fight against the Japanese Imperial Army. Most combat takes place in jungles and ambushes, stuff like that. So we're going to get into the whole entire thing. So ready, guys? We're going to get started with World at War. If I can find a clip of the intro, I guess I'll play it for you. So the story begins on Makin Island on August 17th, 1942. American Marine Private C. Miller watches the torture and execution of his team and is about to be executed himself before being rescued by another squad of Marines, led by Corporal Roebuck and Sergeant Tom Sullivan. They assaulted the Japanese on the island, replicating the Makin Island raid. The Battle of Palau is then replicated. After breaking through the Japanese lines on the Palau beach, Miller destroys 2 Type 97 Chi-Haze type tanks with rocket strikes, allowing the American tanks to advance. At the end of the mission, Sullivan is killed by a Japanese officer with a katana. Roebuck is promoted to sergeant, and he and his squad mates make their way through the Palau swamps to launch an assault on a Japanese-held airfield to disable anti-aircraft guns. During the assault, Miller acquires a flamethrower to destroy a bunker and a bazooka to destroy the Chi-Haze position airfield. Meanwhile, the Battle of Stalingrad in the Eastern Front on September 17th, 1942. Russian Private Dmitry Petrenko regains consciousness in a blood-stained, bloody-filled fountain. Just as German troops execute his comrades, when they leave, Dmitry meets injured Sergeant Viktor Reznov, another survivor who tells him of his mission to kill German General Heinrich Amsel, who was responsible for the massacre. After killing German soldiers on their way and dueling an enemy sniper, Dmitry follows Reznov through buildings and streets, and they meet up with the remainder of Dmitry's unit, who are about to assault the German communication post. During the assault, Dmitry provides overwatch with Reznov and aids the remaining Red Army soldiers as they recapture the post, managing to kill Amsel as he flees. Dmitry and Reznov jump into the Volga River and escape the pursuing Germans after killing Amsel. The next mission takes place 3 years later during the Battle of Seelow Heights near Berlin. Dmitry has been captured by German soldiers in an abandoned house, but is saved when the Red Army attacks the house. He is reunited with Reznov and introduced to his right-hand man, Private Chernov. The Soviet troops advance to the German lines, and Dmitry aids them with a parent shock until they reach and wipe out a German camp. Then the campaign jumps back to the Pacific side. After pushing further into the island of Palau, Miller and his unit take out enemy mortar crews, so their tanks can go inland. Then they proceed to the Japanese underground tunnels, where they attack the artillery field point. One of the most major Japanese strongholds that they had destroyed many landing boats when they first landed. This allows American ships to advance, and Palau finally falls into American hands. Back in Eastern Europe, Dmitry and Reznov pilot a T-34 tank pushing through German lines along with the rest of the unit, so the Soviet troops can board a train to Berlin. Upon arrival, they engage German soldiers on the outskirts of Berlin, eventually pushing them out of the outskirts, commencing the Battle of Berlin. Then they advance and fight through the city over the next few days, getting closer to Reichstag. Dimitri's unit fights in apartment buildings and through the streets. After eliminating a German position in the streets, they reach the entrance to Berlin, Uba, where 3 German soldiers are attempting to surrender. Reznov is unwilling to deny his men to their revenge. He gives Dimitri the choice of shooting them or burning them alive with a Molotov cocktail. Once an artillery begins, they head to U-Bahn to avoid being shelled and start fighting German soldiers all around the platform until a surge of water fills the tunnel, and Dimitri, unable to avoid an oncoming tidal wave, almost drowns. After America gains Palau, the Battle of Okinawa occurs on the Pacific, where the petty officer Lockheed and a PBY Catalan fighting boat takes part in a raid on 3 American ships. On their way back to base, another Catalina, codenamed Hammerhead, is destroyed by Japanese Zeros, leaving Lockheed and his crew alone. The U.S. fleet is assaulted, replicating Operation Tengo. Lockheed's PBY, the only PBY airplane near enough to come to the immediate aid, works to rescue as many American sailors as possible by fighting off Japanese PT boats and kamikaze planes. With the PBY also completely destroyed, more sorry, I'm trying to find this. More U.S. aircrafts arrive and drive off the remaining Zeros. In the following mission, Miller's squad make a ground assault on Okinawa while clearing the Japanese from machine gun bunkers and allowing the Americans' tanks to progress. With the battle almost won, the Americans stormed Sherry Castle amidst mortar shelling and massive fancy charging. Once inside, they encounter Japanese soldiers surrendering. However, when Roebuck and Polanski go to search them, they reveal concealed grenades under their clothes, at which point Miller is framed with the choice of either saving Roebuck or Polanski, deciding whoever you shoot. The remaining American troops arrive to assist and engage the remaining Japanese soldiers in a battle in the castle center. After Miller calls in airstrikes on both buildings, the Americans take Sherry Castle, crushing the last battalion of Japanese resistance in the Pacific War, thus ending the Pacific campaign. Meanwhile, Reznov drags Dimitri out of U-Bahn to regroup with the Soviet infantry. The Red Army then advances towards the Reichstag. During the assault at the Reichstag entrance, Chernov is severely burned by a flamethrower and is implied he dies of wounds later. Reznov, Dimitri, and the remaining Soviet soldiers enter the Reichstag, clear of its German defenders, and reach the rooftop. After a final showdown on the top floor to reach the Nazi flag, Dimitri is shot by a dying German soldier in an attempt to stop him from planting the Soviet flag. But Reznov kills the German with a machete. Although wounded, Dimitri manages to plant the Soviet flag, signaling Soviet victory and end for the war in Europe. So in the American campaign, the missions are Semper Fi, Little Resistance, Hard Landing, Burn Them Out, Relentless, Black Cats, Blowtorch, and Corkscrew, and Breaking Point. In Russia, Verdanta, Their Land, Their Blood, Blood and Iron, Ring and Steel, Eviction, Heart of the Ranch, and Downfall. Essentially, these were the scrap missions: Fly, Holland, Rhineland, Training, and Prologue. So essentially, that's it for, that is going to be it for World.War. Black Ops 1. The game is set in the Cold War era. Much of the Call of Duty Black Ops campaign is told through the eyes of the SOG and CIA operative Alex Mason. Primarily through flashbacks, Mason awakes strapped to a chair in a room filled with monitors, bombarded with questions by 2 unknown interrogators. After numbers broadcast, Mason then recalls several events from the past in an attempt to answer their questions, setting up the missions of the game. The first mission is a flashback to April 17th, 1961. Mason and his comrades Frank Woods and Joseph Bowman take part in the Bay of Pigs invasion to assassinate Fidel Castro and assist CIA-sponsored Cuban exiles in overthrowing Castro's communist regime. Mason apparently succeeds before realizing that the CIA's Cuban rebels are losing against Castro's armed forces. Therefore, he decides to stay behind to protect the extraction, playing with Woods and Bowman aboard an oncoming blockade. Mason is then captured by the real Castro, who reveals that Mason has assassinated was a doppelganger, and hands him over to Major General Nikita Dragovich as a gift, in quotations. He is held captive at Vorkuta Gulag, a Russian labor camp, for 2 years. Sorry, let me just... After further interrogation, Mason recounts how during his imprisonment at Vorkuta, he befriended Viktor Reznov, a former Red Army soldier from World at War. And yet, Reznov assists Mason in sparking a prisoner uprising at Vorkuta, which facilitates Mason escapes from the prison. 1 month after his escape, Mason is escorted to the Pentagon with his handler, Jason Hudson, where he receives authorization from the President, John F. Kennedy, to assassinate Dragovich. Mason... Hold on. Sorry, I lost my spot. Alright, to assassinate Dragovich. Mason briefly envisions pointing a gun at Kennedy. He is then dispatched with Woods and Bowman to a Bankar Cosmodrome in the SSR to sabotage the Soviet space program. The team saves the Capitol operative and destroys the Soyuz 2 rockets as it is launched. Dragovich, who is present at the launch, escapes alive, forcing Mason to spend the next 5 years searching for him. By 1968, the SOG, including Mason, is deployed in Vietnam to investigate the Soviet presence. After Mason helps defend the military camp at Khe Sanh, he's deployed to Hue during the Tet offensive to discover a dossier with information on Dragovich from an armed defector. The team recovers the dossier, and Mason discovers that Reznov is the defector. After Mason escapes Hue City, the campaign shifts to a mission in Kowloon, Hong Kong, where Hudson and Weaver are sent to find and interrogate Dr. Clark, a scientist working under Dragovich. Clark reveals the location of a hidden facility in the Ural Mountains before the trio are ambushed by Dragovich's men. Hudson and Weaver escape, but Clark is killed before he can explain the numbers broadcast. Then, after further interrogation, Mason reveals the story, as told to him by Reznov, of the history behind Dragovich and his right-hand man, Lev Kravchenko, and German ally Dr. Friedrich Steiner. These events take place shortly after World War II. They detail Dragovich's discovery of a German biochemical weapon, Nova 6, and illustrates his ruthlessness as he murders his own soldiers to witness the effects on the weapon, including Reznov's closest friend, Dmitry Petrenko. This mission ends with Reznov asking Mason to promise him that Petrenko's death will be avenged, and Dragovich, along with his allies, Kravchenko and Steiner, will be killed. Mason promises that, and then, back to the interrogation, moves back to 1968, and Mason describes how he and the rest of his squad from the SOG fight their way through Viet Cong-controlled territory in an ultimately futile attempt to chase an elusive Kravchenko, and are later sent to locate and investigate a downed Soviet plane containing Nova 6. During this investigation, Mason, Woods, and Bowman are captured by the Viet Cong. Again, the perspective switches to Agent Hudson, who is sent on a mission to infiltrate the base Clark mentioned in the Ural Mountains, a suspected development center of Nova 6. The control room of the facility is rigged with explosives in a trap set by Dragovich, but Hudson's team is contacted remotely by Dr. Steiner, who gives his location and promises, in exchange for safety from Dragovich's system elimination of loose ends, in quotations, information on cracking the numbers broadcast. After the mission is completed, Mason describes to his interrogator how Bowman was killed while imprisoned. Rip him. While imprisonment, and how he and Woods escaped from the Viet Cong captors. They are also forced to play Russian roulette. Mason and Woods fight from a vast swath of Vietnamese led into a stolen Mi-24 Hind to reach Kravchenko's base. At this base, Mason again meets Reznov, who leads him to the base towards Kravchenko. They confront Kravchenko and Woods stabs him, but Kravchenko pulls the pin off 4 grenades strapped to his chest, forcing Woods to sacrifice himself by tackling Kravchenko out of the window. In a huge explosion, Mason presumes the two dead. Mason and Reznov Reznov then recovered documents that linked them to Rebirth Island, the location of Dr. Steiner. Mason's story converges with Hudson at Rebirth Island as they both fight their way through a Soviet Nova 6 research and production facility to reach Dr. Steiner. Hudson engages in an all-out assault on the facility with light armor and a squad of CIA operatives. While Mason sneaks into the facility with Reznov, Mason and Reznov reach Steiner only shortly before Hudson and Weaver, and Mason watches as Reznov murders Steiner. However, when the same story is retold through Hudson's eyes, it was revealed that, in fact, Mason alone who shot Steiner, while exclaiming that he was Reznov and would have revenge. The flashbacks end and the interrogation continues. Hudson reveals himself and Weaver to be the interrogators and confronts Mason face to face. In this mission, Hudson reveals that while at Vorkuta, Mason was subjected to several mental reconditioning in order to turn him into a sleeper cell who would perform Soviet missions in America, including assassinating President Kennedy. However, Reznov, in quotations, hijacked this conditioning and used to instill as Mason as an absolute devotion to complete Reznov vow for revenge to kill Dragovich, Kravchenko, and Steiner. Thus why Reznov said, "Kill them for revenge on Dmitry Petrenko." Reznov never escaped Vorkuta but died during the breakout attempt, and the Soviet defector and Hugh actually died before Mason reached him. Mason's visions of Reznov are assault of a dissociative order caused by the traumatic brainwashing program. Hudson reveals that Dragovich has sleeper cells placed all over the U.S. When ordered by the Numbers broadcast, will unleash Nova 6 in every state capital in the country. As a result, the United States is now as DEFCON 2 and preparing a preemptive nuclear strike on the Soviet Union. Hudson further explains that the CIA needed Steiner alive to decipher the number broadcast on them so they could abort the Nova 6 release, but with his death, only Mason has any knowledge on the number station. As the reprogramming of Mason's brain is finally broken, Mason recalls the Numbers broadcast. A ship off the shore of Cuba called the Rusalk. A CIA raid on the Rusalk begins with Mason and Hudson infiltrating the underwater base, protecting the ship, and Hudson calling the U.S. Navy to destroy Rusalka. At lower levels of the facility, Hudson and Mason confront Dragovich, and Mason strangles and drowns him to death before escaping with Hudson. He then regroups with Weaver, who declares victory. But the plot twist. Archive footage of President Kennedy prior to his assassination on November 22nd, 1963 is shown, revealing Mason was the one who killed Kennedy. Bum bum bum! We're gonna get on to Black Ops. So guys, I'm not gonna do Cold War because I, number one, don't have enough information that I researched on it, and number two, I haven't played the game. I've seen a few walkthroughs by like T Martin, Game Maddox, and the Rad Brad and Hollow, but that's it. I haven't really played it myself, so I'm just gonna go right to Black Ops 2. So so let's get started. In the year 2025, a U.S. Special Operations team led by David Mason as his partner Mike Harper arrive at the Vault, in quotations, a top security location home to an aging Frank Woods, whom they suspected possesses vital information on the whereabouts of Raul Menendez. Woods concedes that Menendez has recently visited him and shows them a locket that latter had left behind. Frank then narrates several convert missions undertaken during his military career, which spans by the president encounters. So guys, we're going to kind of do a few flashback missions, then we're going to get into, the future. So, let's get into it. In the year 2025, a U.S. Special Operations team led by David Mason and his partner Mike Harper arrive at... No, not that. Alright, sorry. According to Woods, by 1986, Alex Mason had effectively retired from active duty to pursue an obscure existence in Alaska with his son. The 7-year-old David, with the 7-year-old son David. Their shaky relationship is straightened further when Mason is solicited by his former handler Jason Hudson, seeking to recruit him for an assignment in Quando, Cubango during the height of the Angolan Civil and South American border wars. African. Woods have disappeared with his men while aiding Jonas Savani's Utah rebels against Angola's Max's government. Their actions have already been disavowed by the CIA and Hudson's hopes to rescue any survivors. With UNTA's assistance, Mason and Hudson recover from the Cubango, subsequently locating Menendez among a contingent of Cuban military advisors. However, a firefight breaks out and their quarry escapes as the Americans are rescued by a helicopter. It is revealed that Menendez is responsible for holding Woods captive after murdering his team. In the light of this information, Mason, Woods, and Hudson began tracking Menendez, who's established himself by a primary arms dealer for bush conflicts in Southern Africa and Latin America. Later in this year, the CIA authorizes a strike team against the unscrupulous Nicaraguan, now making healthy profit running arms against Soviet occupation of Afghanistan. The trio and Chinese operative Tian Zhao ally with an Afghan mujahideen against the Soviets. They locate Lev Kravchenko, who survived the grenade explosion in Vietnam with Woods, and interrogate him about Menendez's plans before executing him. The mujahideen then betray the Americans and Zhao, leaving them to die in Africa's Afghans wild until they're rescued by the two unidentified civilians. At this point, Menendez's motive for seeming senseless vendetta against the wall become clear. His sister, Josefina, was grievously injured in an act of arson committed by American businessmen for insurance money. The Menendez clan, which dominates a powerful drug cartel, was again rocketed by the loss when the CIA sanctions the assassination of Raul's father. An embedded Menendez now considers the conflict to be personal, but one man's struggle against the West is interrupted when Mason, Woods, Hudson, and local security forces raid his headquarters in Nicaragua. During the chaos, an enraged Wood inadvertently kills Josefina with a grenade. Faking his demise with the assistance Manuel Noriega of the Panama diactor Manuel Noriega, Menendez lives to retaliate against those he held personal responsibilities for his sister's death. During the 1989 invasion of Panama, he kidnaps Hudson and David, using them as a bait for a trap. He then uses Hudson to misplay Woods, manipulating him into shouting and possibly killing Mason instead of himself. Depending on the player's actions during Kravchenko's interrogation, it is implied that Menendez has moles in the CIA, moles within the CIA, ensuring chaos. Menendez kills Hudson and cripples Woods. Unsatisfied with his revenge, Menendez allows Woods and David to live, promising to return to complete his revenge when the time is right. 3 decades later, Menendez re-emerges and is the leader of Kurdistan, a massive populist movement with over 2 billion followers. He stages a cyber attack that cripples the Chinese stock exchange. In response, the Chinese ban the export of rare earth elements, permitting the start of a brand new Cold War between the Chinese and Strategic Defensive Coin (SDC) and the U.S.-led NATO. Taking advantage of the stand, Menendez attempts to bring two powers to a fully blown war into conflicts between the two, secretly aiding taking advantage of the standoff. Menendez leader Chairman Tian Zhao, who worked with Mason and Woods during the operation in Afghanistan in 1986, using intelligence provided by Woods, David, now a Navy SEAL commander codenamed Section, leads JSOC forces in the renewed search for Menendez. Shortly after gathering intelligence from Woods, Section and JSOC infiltrate Myanmar, investigating a spike in the activity in the region. Their Section's team encounter a computer engineer under Menendez's employment, warning there of a cyber attack with the Solarium device, a quantum computer capable of hacking any computer system. Section's team is later deployed in Pakistan, attempting to gather intelligence on Menendez's plots. During the information, Menendez discloses the name of a target, Karma, in the Cayman Islands. Section and a SEAL operative Harper and Salazar later infiltrate the Cayman Islands, finding out that, in quotations, Karma is a woman named Chloe Lynch, a former employee of Menendez's shell company corporation. Tentacus Lynch was the main developer on a Solarium device as a means of wrapping up loose ends. Menendez has deployed mercenaries for her abduction, led by his second-in-command, DeFalco Salazar. You heard that right, Salazar. Section and Harper either rescued by Lynch by killing them. JSOC. Where was it? JSOC later has a lead on Menendez in Yemen, where JSOC assistant Fred infiltrates Menendez's call to help. Sorry. Excuse me, guys. Section Faciliate, the leaders capture the player as Fred has a choice during the mission. Menendez, suspecting Farad's disloyalty, orders him to shoot the captured Harper. If the player chooses not to shoot Harper and instead attempts to shoot Menendez, he falls and is executed. But Harper survives and is rescued. If the player chooses to shoot Harper, Farad survives and Harper is not present in any conversations or missions thereafter. Menendez is successfully captured, but this was a ruse for Menendez to hack into the U.S. military's computer infrastructure on the aircraft carrier USS Obama. Seizing control of the entire U.S. drone fleet, Salazar is revealed to be Menendez's mole within JSOC and facilitates Menendez's attack. Menendez escapes with Salazar's aid, and when Menendez breaks into the bridge of Omaha, Salazar shoots the soldiers guarding Admiral Briggs. What happens next depends on the fate of Farad, DeFalco, and Lynch. Lynch will be absent if she was not rescued. If Farad is alive, he dies either by shielding Lynch from Salazar or killing DeFalco. If he is alive by this point, if Farad is dead, Lynch will be killed. The player playing as Menendez has the choice of either killing or wounding Admiral Briggs. If the player only wounds Briggs and the player has completed all the Strike Force missions, JSOC and SDC enter an alliance. Then the players later informed that the SDC sent hundreds of drones to defend the Obama, with constantly Briggs was able to save the ship and its crew. Menendez escapes the ship while Salazar is caught and will be executed by Harper if he is still alive. Menendez then uses drones to stage an attack on LA during a meeting of G20 leaders, hoping to kill them and cause catastrophic damage to the global economy. Section escorts U.S. President Bullsworth to safety and admits the drone attacks. JSOC eventually finds the source of the transmission responsible for hacking the Haiti, where Section leads JSOC forces into recapturing the facility in the final mission and apprehending or killing Menendez. There are different endings depending on the action the player takes throughout the campaign, such as whether or not the United States and China are able to enter an alliance with each other, as well as demanding the fates of certain individuals in the game. During the main campaign, the player may choose to participate in optional strike missions. The strike missions involves JSOC attempting to curb with the SDC global influence by preventing them from forcing nearby countries into the alliance, with one such mission being to rescue Lynch from DeFaco. If he escapes with her in the previous encounter, Section himself does not participate in these missions directly, though he can command the forces remotely from a command center. If the missions are completed successfully, the SDC is weakened enough to ally with JSOC and assist the players later in the campaign. For example, in sending in own drones to rescue the USS Obama. Now we're going to be going over endings. So we got a bunch of stuff here that we need to go over. So if the player spares Menendez's life, completes all 4 Strike Force missions, and both Chloe Lynch and Alex Mason survive the events of the game, the, in quotations, best ending will result. The player will have secured an alliance between China and the United States entering the Second Cold War. Chloe's survival prevents Menendez's cyber attack from succeeding. And Mason survives, allows him to visit Frank Woods in retirement, reuniting with Section. The final scene shows Menendez in prison watching a talk show with Jimmy Kimmel interviewing Chloe. Becoming frustrated and enraged when he finds out that he has lost everything, and she consults him during the interview, he bashes his head into a TV, stumbles, holds his right hand to the bleeding forehead, then licks the blood off his fingers before laughing at it. The player will be rewarded with the best ending. A tutorial of these. That's it. If Menendez is spared and Chloe lives, but Mason dies, Section and Woods will visit Mason's grave, and Section will declare that he is done with his military career. Chloe will stop Menendez's cyber attack again, and he will be unable to escape from custody. This ending is similar to the best ending, but Mason won't reunite with Section since he is dead. If Menendez is killed and Chloe and Mason are both alive, Mason will reunite with Woods again at the vault after 37 years. Chloe will halt Menendez's cyber attack. Section will meet Mason again at the vault, and Menendez Falls will riot across the world.
We lost the battle, but the war goes on. Bring your A game.
If Menendez is killed, Chloe lives, and Mason dies. Section and Woods will visit his grave. Chloe will stop Menendez's cyber attack. Menendez followers will riot over his assassination. If Menendez is killed, Chloe dies, and Mason lives. Section will kill Menendez before reuniting with his father at the retirement home, and Menendez followers will riot as above. If Menendez is killed, Chloe dies, and Mason is killed, Section will visit his father's grave, ending his military career. Menendez's followers will riot when they learn of his assassination from a video Menendez programmed to post in such an event, ending with a cut of the White House burning. If Menendez is spared, Chloe dies, but Mason is alive. He will visit Woods in the vault, but Section will not come to the vault and see his reunion with his father. Without Chloe, Menendez's cyber attack will succeed, and he will break out of custody and kill Woods before committing suicide. If Menendez is spared, Chloe is killed, and Mason is dead, Section will apprehend Menendez and take him into custody. The cyber attack will succeed, allowing Menendez to escape from prison. He kills Woods in the vault before visiting his sister's grave, dousing himself in gasoline and readying a lit match. The screen turns black, and the sound of fire igniting is heard. This is considered the worst ending. And that, my friends, is it for Call of Duty Black Ops 2. So guys, this is going to be the longest one. I'm not going to go into depth of it. It's quite long, not going to lie. It's like, when I wrote it out, it's at least like a good 8 sentences per paragraph, and this is like 12, 13 paragraphs, so buckle your seatbelts and grab a few snacks, because this is the longest one yet. So, I just wanted to let you know, and let's get started. Black Ops 3. On October 27th, 2065, the game begins with the player, aka you, and their NCO, Commander Jacob Hendricks, infiltrating an NRC airbase in Ethiopia to rescue Ethiopian Prime Minister Said from the NRC with the assistance of John Taylor and his team of cybernetically enhanced soldiers, part of the Winslow Accord. Black Cyber Ops Division, needing to distract the NRC, the player and Hendricks, along with Winslow Accord Special Forces, I'm just going to say WASF, Team Alpha, use the base's dead system to shoot down an NRC plane. Disguised as NRC soldiers, The player and Hendricks manage to infiltrate the base and rescue Sed from the NRC. Although they discover there are more prisoners than their intel, the team soon become compromised after Sed convinces them to rescue Lieutenant Kali, an Egyptian army veterans war hero who's the NRC plan to use in tool as their campaign against the Egyptian people. Army veteran. They soon rendezvous with Taylor's team after being cornered by NRC forces. And proceed to escape the base. Manage to pronounce any enemy APC before leaving. Man, my neck hurts, man. But before leaving, Hendricks convinces Taylor to rescue the other hostages after reminding that some part of him must still be human. While their escape is successful, the player and Team Alpha are left behind after their evac carrier sustains heavy fire and bugs out to avoid being shot down. Although Hendricks demands that they go on, the player and Team Alpha are eventually overrun by enemy forces and the members of Team Alpha and are killed, and the player is viciously attacked by an NRC grunt, aka robot, ripping both of the player's arms off and breaking the right and left leg until they are found and rescued by Taylor. Believing that it's the player's best chance for survival, Taylor brings them to a research installation that specializes in advanced cybernetic enchantments that Taylor and his team use and decides the same cybernetics to save the player's life. The player is later awakened on board a train by Taylor, reveals that the player had survived the mission but had seen life-threatening injuries in the field. The player soon learns that the train they're standing on is a simulation created with their DNIs. Revealing that the player was given one and is currently in a medical-induced coma. And Taylor explains that the DNI allows them to communicate with each other at a subconsciousness level and tells the player that they have a long way to go. Taylor introduces them to his unit, which consists of cyber operative Sebastian Diaz, Sarah Hill, Peter Marietti. During a series of simulations of past battles that they were connected with in a terrorist attack on a Coalscape train inside the player's own mind. Alright, let's get started into the next one. The next paragraph. Each operative assists the player in putting their pieces together on how to use their new cybernetics in combat, while also helping themselves progress to the simulated terrorist attack. Although the player proves themselves as an efficient soldier, the player suffers a minor setback when they come across a group of simulated grunts, causing the simulation to briefly destabilize until they are calmed down by Diaz, who reveals that their DNI can cause certain traumatic memories to seem realistic and can have damaging long-term effects if not treated. The player eventually reaches the final stage of the simulation of the simulated train bombing and manages to reach the bomb, but is unable to defuse it in time with the DNI. The player remains unsure of what to do until they're helped by Taylor, who tells the solution is quite simple. Breaking off the train car carrying the bomb can be detached from the rest of the train using their DNI. The player sacrifices himself by detaching the train car while still inside and the bomb detonates, ending the simulation. Taylor then informs the player that there was really no way to stop the train despite all the player's new abilities, telling them that although their DNI can show them all the answers, it will be up to them to choose what they have to sacrifice, and they sometimes must let go. The player is awoken in the real world and informed by Taylor that they're being prepped for surgery. Although Hendricks wasn't injured on this mission, he volunteers for the cybernetic surgery as well, and both he and the player are recruited into Taylor's unit. Woo! That is a lot. In 2070, the player and Hendricks, who are now close friends, are recruited by CIA agent Rachel Kane to investigate the CIA black station in Singapore that lost connections. En route, they encounter foot soldiers of the ruthless criminal organizations, the 54 Immortals, who have access to military-grade weapons. Needing to fight, though, for the 45 I forces to reach their objective, the operatives are temporarily pinned down by heavily armored Men of the Wolf warlord cyborgs before they are rescued by Kane, who joins Hendricks and the player in reaching the safe house. Upon arrival, the team discovers the CIA black station briefly murdered in the ritual denial of reincarnation, and data drives go through, but they initially believe that the 54I enforcer J Ixiong is responsible for the murders. Kane goes through an entry logs for the safe house and discovers that Taylor's team was the last one there before arriving. Both Hendricks and the player are initially unconvinced of Kane's theory about Taylor having served with him for the past 5 years. Whew! Do you guys think I can get this done in 7 minutes?
Switching sides.
Well, let's find out. In order to learn about the truth of what happened, the player and Hendricks then lead an assault on the 54 Immortals headquarters in Biodomes to recover the data drives by possessing an arms dealer. Making contact with 54I drug dealer Danny Lee at a tea house owned by the 54I. While Hendricks attempts to learn the whereabouts of Jin Ixiong, Lee states that nobody has seen him in years. After managing them to convince Lee to work with them, the pair are compromised by the 54I leaders and siblings Gomon and Go Ixiong, who quickly deduce the arms dealers and actually members of the Winslow Accord. Greatly outnumbered, Hendricks orders Kane to active friendly grunt reinforcements, killing both Goman and Lee and forcing blah 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 to flee. After fighting their way to 54I headquarters, the player and Hendricks go catch Go Ixiong, attempt to decrypt the drivers with Hendricks knocking her out. Then they attempt to pull the information out of the drivers, but are locked out due to a DNA security system that only allows Go's siblings access to the console. With Goman dead, the player's servers Go Xman right hand in order to access the console, which act clearly as both Hendricks. After obtaining the information from the drivers, then the pair escaped with Hendricks, claiming that what he saw was bullshit. Confirming that Taylor and his team have indeed gone rogue. Oof. Let's get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 more, including this one that I'm on. So guys, we have to speed read. Alright guys, ready? To present Taylor's sudden betrayal, the team uses the intel they arrived to investigate the site of Taylor's Loft Op, an abandoned Clancy Corporation facility in Singapore where 30,000 people were killed a long time ago. Within the facility, Hendricks and the player are both attacked by seemingly inactive grunts displaying odd human-like behavior. They discover the facility was actually a cover for the CIA black project named Project Corvus and later find a decapitated corpse on Jake's Yingxiang and several other tests. One of the CIA performed DNI experience on them and against their will. They soon learn that Diaz himself is nearby and hooked up to a blah blah blah, 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 controlling the guns and ordering CIA player to stop him. When they managed to stop Diaz, the intel was unfortunately sent, revealing every CIA safe house location not in. Kane orders to infer Diaz DNA, killing the rogue soldier in the process. The team learns that Taylor Squad is currently hunting down the 2 soldiers of Project George Yasilum, who's blah blah. And while Hendricks and the player manage to escape the facility, Kane orders them to leave Singapore to avoid being executed by 54I after a position was compromised by the data leaks. Woo! That was a lot! Knowing that Kane will have no chance of survival if she stays, the player refuses to abandon her and convinces Hendricks to help rescue Kane from the 54 forces. Blah blah blah. After escaping Singapore, the team heads to Egypt to interrogate Youssef Salami, who's been apprehended by Lieutenant Khalid's forces. Hendricks, who is on edge, interrogates Salem, telling him that Taylor and his team will kill him unless he reveals what he knows about the project and the Frozen Forest, waiting all that rogue and all the DNI experiments, all that stuff. Becoming more aggressive, Hendricks violently demands why Taylor and his team are obsessed with the Frozen Forest, but is interrupted by a sudden explosion, warning that the NRC are attacked, all that stuff. Admitting that he shouldn't have taken his feelings about the mission of the player, but he tells everything that feels wrong. This one isn't really important. Also, this one isn't important, so we're gonna skip. After managing to catch up to Taylor, the pair is soon confronted by an army of grunts, with Hendricks staying behind them to hold them off while the player continues to pursue Taylor on the top of Wada's tower. The player then fights Taylor, who's commanded an other mothership. While the player manages to take down the mothership, the cybernetic arm is pinned to the ship's debris, all that stuff. Kane manages.
You have taken the lead.
Taylor reminds that Corvus still resides in the DNIs of both the player and Hendricks. Alright, so Taylor is not himself. The player manages to get through to him briefly as Taylor regains his senses and tears out his own DNI through his neck. All that stuff. Kane manages to extract the player and bring them to the hospital, where the player tells Kane they don't need to stop Hendricks. Kane, not wanting to lose the player, tries to convince him that they don't have to remain with all that stuff. This is crazy, so I want to get this done as soon as possible. While the player is still able to fight through Corvus's digital forces, their mental state becomes more and more fractured as they begin to chant Corvus's words. Although Taylor remains their voice of no reason and tells them to keep pressing forward after fighting their way through Corvus illusory forces, the player manages to regain control of the body and attempts to purge their DNI. Corvus makes a last-ditch effort to control the player, but is held off by Taylor, who tells the player to keep fighting. The player then purges on a DNI, causing both Corvus and Taylor to disappear. As the player stumbles out of the building where the controlled robotics were overrun by ZSF, a soldier asks the player to identify themselves. After a system slowly completes the purge, the player says Taylor before the screen dramatically goes black, leaving the player to a non-reality fate unknown. Woo! That was a lot, guys. Leave a like and subscribe if you guys just want to hear the Black Ops 3 universe by itself, because this one is good. So, love you guys. Remember, leave a like and subscribe. This has been one, but I'll probably just do a separate one on Black Ops 3, as that's how long it is. But that was a quick brief on that. So, leave a like, subscribe, and the bell to see more. But peace, guys. This took me 47 minutes.